death, oh death, won't you spare me over for another year? Oh Death is a song that was made famous by Ralph Stanley in the year 2000 when the Coen brothers did the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The song is not actually a Ralph Stanley song. It was written by a man named Lloyd Chandler in the 1920s in his story called Conversations with Death. In the 1920s, people were a lot closer to death than they are now. Today, I've had a lot of my relatives have passed away, and I've never really had to deal with their death other than just being kind of an observer and the person who has to feel the pain of what happens when a loved one of mine dies. I've never had to actually handle the body or lift them up or put them in the truck or take them out of the bed or anything like that. It's a little different with animals. So we have lots of animals here at the house, and they rate, I'll go from the highest to lowest form of animals: dogs, cats, and chickens. Watching them die is something that is incredibly difficult to do. If you've never done it, one day you probably will, and I'm just going to tell you right now, it sucks ass. Now, we also have a lot of chickens here, and so one thing that chickens have allowed me to do is get a little closer to death and see it more often and more frequently. In the time that we've been raising chickens, I've seen at least 24 birds come and go. Normally, what gets the chickens is something quickly. It'll be like a coyote, sort of just comes, and when they're free ranging out in the yard, murders them and leaves a pile of feathers, and then the bird is just gone. For me, I'm able to accept the death of the birds a little bit easier than, say, the cats or the dogs, which I'm a little more attached to and I live my life more intimately with. We're having trouble with a bird right now who has been sick for about 3 weeks, and her decline came kind of slow, but she's getting pretty close to the end now. On the one hand, I feel like it's my obligation as a human who understands death and what's happening to help the bird pass on from this life to death by perhaps dispatching it myself. There's a reason I'm so ambivalent about doing something to bring this bird's life to a quicker end. So one of the conundrums of being human is knowing about death, knowing that it's imminent for everything that's living on the planet, and having the power to perhaps do something about it. When I tell people about the bird that's in decline, they usually come up with something like, well, you should put it out of its misery because it's suffering. And I have a little bit of a problem with this because I just don't know emphatically that this bird is suffering. I mean, as a living thing, just like I'm a living thing, every cell in my body is doing everything it can to keep me alive without me actually thinking about it. I mean, how do I know that this bird is not doing the same thing, is not perhaps, trying to hang on to life as hard as the man in Ralph Stanley's song is trying to hang on to life as well. It wants death to leave it alone. I want to stay here. I don't want to go. Years ago, there was a squirrel who was laying in my driveway at my house, and when I walked up to it, it was just laying there, and it was still alive. I could see that it was still breathing and everything like that. And I felt that, okay, well, this squirrel is obviously hurt and it must be suffering in some way. So it's my job, my duty as a human being who knows that it must be suffering and who knows that suffering is something to be avoided at all cost, to put this squirrel out of its misery. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I went up to my house and I grabbed a 2x4 that was about 2.5 feet long. And I walked over to the squirrel with complete and utter trepidation on what I was about to do. And I smacked the squirrel on the head as hard as I could. Now, I was thinking that I would smack the squirrel and he would just be dead. He would just somehow just die. But that wasn't what happened at all. As soon as I hit the squirrel, he started to flop and convulse, like when you've ever seen an animal that got run over in the road, like a cat or a dog. It just went into this complete spasm. And there's this squirrel that's up in the tree who is just screaming at me with this like, eh, 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 eh. And so now I have more anxiety than I even had to start with this. And so I continued to just pound the squirrel in the head until he stopped moving. This traumatized me for a long, long time. It traumatized me so badly that I was actually talking to my neighbor about it sometime after this. And this is a woman who was a very smart woman. She was very intelligent, and she was very attuned to the world in a way that at the time I really, really wasn't. And so I told her this story. And her reply to me was that if this ever happens to you again, what you need to do is you just need to stop. You need to stop, and you need to cast out any preconceived notion you had about life and death, and you need to listen to the animal that is in question, and you need to try to listen to what it is telling you. So the only way that you can relate to them is in a more intuitive way. And so that's what I've tried to do in the case of this bird. Clearly, there's no reason to be afraid of death. There's nothing you can do about it. It's coming to all of us. But it is kind of fascinating when you think about it as a specter that's something apart from you and not something that's already in you already. As the Buddhists would say, the bowl is already broken. I am already dead. So there's really not much you can do about that. So anyway, here's another song that reminds me of that's kind of on the same level, where death is like a specter as well. My body's aching from laying in this bed. I went singing in the rain and the cold went to my head. I don't know who's paying, I just know what the doctor said. 84 years of sin in life, and in the morning I'll be dead. With apologies to Grace Potter, she does a lot better work on that song than I do, so be sure to check it out. It's really a good one when she's in your town.